Live from the chicken wing capital of the world, Buffalo, New York. You're listening to the Childcare Bridge podcast, your source for the best tips, tools, and tactics on how to market and grow your childcare center, ensuring total domination. Total domination. This is the Childcare Bridge, and this is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Childcare Bridge. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been working through this formula of mass and breaking down every single week the different changes, the different trends, the different key areas that you need to focus on as a childcare center business owner in 2025 and beyond. Week one, we talked about marketing and all the marketing trends and changes and areas that need your attention by way of time and money. Last week, we talked about the A, which is accounting. And what do you actually need to be looking at from a numbers standpoint? What methodology of bookkeeping should you be using? And how do you actually manage the money? And we talked about profit first. Today, we're going to talk about one of the two S's, and that is sales. So we generate the leads. We make sure that those leads are starting to then convert into tours. And there's this kind of awkward and sometimes kind of negative connotation to selling when it comes to kind of taking people through a tour, then having to get to the end where you're supposed to try and close that particular family. Now, every center does things a little bit differently, but don't take that everyone does things differently, the fact that there isn't the right way, the best way to do it. And I want to walk you through that, but I want to tell you some of these trends that are literally happening as we speak when it comes to the sales side of your business. So in no particular order, first one is that I'm actually seeing people making decisions a lot quicker. So we track from lead in to first contact, to tour, to close. So either they're enrolling, waitlisting, registering, or they decided to go somewhere else. And the numbers vary each month because some months you're going to have a very quick turn. So you might have some families that submit a lead form and come in to take a tour within the first 2 days of August, and they decide to enroll that same week. That they want to make sure that they have care for the upcoming year. School season for a lot of areas is right around the corner. You could see the same thing in January, where a lot of people are making shifts and tweaks that they didn't love the care that they currently were getting, and they wanted to pivot somewhere else. And that cycle could be a little bit quicker. And we're seeing anywhere from typically a 2 to 4 week window from when they submit a form or call to getting in for a tour and then making a decision. That's kind of the average number. So let's use the higher gauge of 30 days. What that means from a sales perspective is that your job is only beginning when the tour happens. Now, some centers will tell me, Michael, we close that day. And on average, we close 8 or 9 out of 10 tours the day of. Is that a possibility? 100% yes. However, the centers that I see that occurring at are ones that are in ridiculous demand, that there are just not enough spots for kids. So they're having to vie for a spot. Like if they get offered a spot, boom, they're taking it. I also see that on the infant side. If there's an opening for infants, most people know that infant care is traditionally not easy to find. So yes, you might have somebody giving you a yes or no right there on the spot. You might be in an area that is high demand for childcare. But if I look at most places across the U.S. and even the globe, there is a fair amount of care across the globe. There are some cities where there is a lot more extra inventory. I should actually do a whole other episode on this exact topic because we can analyze it down to a very close particular degree to figure out where there is a need for care. But if you know that on average, it's going to be between 2 and 4 weeks, your sales game, your follow-up game, your close game, your answer and objection game needs to be very strong. And we're starting to see a trend towards directors not actually doing tours. We're starting to see centers that have multiple locations, which is historically who we mainly work with, actually hiring someone that might be a floater. And that floater, all they do all day long is they jump to this particular location, they go over to that school, assuming that you have a moderate proximity, and they're conducting the tours, but then they're aiming to close on the tours. So these people they're more kind of family relationship experts, but they have a bit more of a sales background rather than a full education background. If you think about your directors, are your directors the best people to be doing all the lead follow-up, making all the calls after the fact, and then having that hard close? And we'll talk about a hard versus a soft close in just a minute. Almost always the answer is no. Your director is better suited working with the families after they're in, coaching your staff, reporting metrics to you so that all of your data is up to date so you can see the performance of each of your locations. But they're normally not trained salespeople. And we've done a lot of training with these directors over the last 10 plus years. And some directors can make improvements, but most they will get incrementally better, but it'll take years. So if you know your numbers and you know them down to a T, that's really the most important aspect to sales. If you don't know exactly how many tours are converting to enrollments, that is your step one. How many of the leads get converted to tours? How many tours then get converted into enrollment? And that data is going to be your guide so that you can see as you're making some tweaks and some changes, what's working, what's not working. You're also going to realize that some of your centers are performing terribly. The average is typically between 30 and 40% end up enrolling. Now, yes, there are centers that they're enrolling 50%, 75%, or even higher. But in terms of families that are showing up, historically, it's 1 out of 3 end up enrolling in your center. So how do you continue to impact those numbers? And what else is changing in 2025 on the sales side? So the first one I've already talked about, and that is a lot of centers are bringing in, again, that kind of floater, but they're more of a salesperson, that they're actually the ones that are doing the tours. They're starting to take away that tour aspect. And they're saying, great, this person's going to do the tours. Now that can get to be a little bit challenging because you're going to have no shows and canceled. So there's a lot of logistics that are involved. When you have someone that then is working off of a script, which we call the $1 million tour script, they're able to methodically work through a script. They're able to answer the objections, and that's starting to uptick these day of closes. The other thing that we're definitely noticing a trend on is that the centers that are getting more of those day of closes, they're willing to test out different offers in a more aggressive manner. So they're a bit more aggressive. You can't tell me that you waiving the registration fee is an aggressive offer. An aggressive offer is if you decide to enroll today, we have a one-time offer where you're going to get 4 weeks completely free of charge. You're going to be given every other month, you're going to get 1 week completely free off your tuition. When you walk out the door today, and I don't want to be a hard sell, but when you walk out the door today, that offer is no longer on the table. Now, it has to be done in a way that you're not seeming overly pushy because parents, they're still on that line of like a hard close versus a soft close. The downside to a soft close is that often the average family is now looking at 4 centers. They used to look at 2 or 3. We're seeing anywhere between 4 and 5 centers. So if you have another center that has a really, really hard close and they're pushing, they're more aggressive with their offers, you might have a superior center. But if your sales process is a little bit weak, you're going to end up losing that business. The other trend that we're seeing that you need to really pay attention to this year is the amount of follow-up after that tour has increased exponentially. We're typically trying to contact that family anywhere between 15 and 25 times over the next couple of weeks. Emails, text messages, voice calls. We're also then putting things physically in the mail. And we're not just giving them, here's the enrollment paperwork. The centers that are doing the best job have what we call kind of a shock and awe kit where they're giving this to the family either right before the tour or they're putting it into the mail and they're actually mailing it out right after the tour. And that's something that most centers are not doing. It's a full-blown packet, and it's not just here's all the different enrollment data for you. And here's the forms you can fill out, but rather here's a folder. There are 10 different tabs. This is why we're the best center, the most reviewed, we have the longest history. Here's our curriculum. Here's a letter from the owners over here. Here's a copy of a book that we wrote. So it's meant to be completely different than anything else that they're getting. And it completely distinguishes your center versus another. But those types of things are not necessarily the norm. That isn't the norm right now. But I promise you, if you were to put something like that in place, and we're more than happy to help you, that will completely start to separate your sales and your closing from all the other centers that are just following up once or twice. You cannot assume the sale anymore. The days of families like begging for care have long been over. The amount of franchises that are coming into the space, and they are so well trained because a franchise, they operate off of a playbook. The one biggest differentiator between your centers and a franchise, if you're not a franchise business, is that a franchise literally has a playbook for everything. That's one of the biggest assets that you get when you decide to join a franchise. That's where they have a higher success rate because they're operating from the same sheet of music, which we'll talk about as we discuss the final S, which is systems and strategy. But having those common playbooks for sales is absolutely essential. And it's making sure that, again, your touch point volume increases exponentially. We're seeing almost everything being done through text. Everything is back and forth through text messages. Most people don't pick up the phone anymore. They want to text, they want to send Facebook messages, but we still want to be hitting them up from other places. So they're going to get a voicemail from you. They'll get a text message. They see it in their inbox. A few days later, they're going to get a thank you card that's handwritten from the director, ideally, and or the person that did the tour. Maybe there's a small little gift. It's the little things that are very different that no one else is doing that are going to separate your center. What if you had the parent or parents and the child take a picture when they came into the center, and you sent that picture in a nice photo frame that has maybe your logo on it, and it looks, and maybe you don't put your logo, but it's a nice frame that is something that they would display, and you just send it as a small thank you. So great meeting you and XYZ, whoever that is. You definitely want to use first names. Don't just say your son or your daughter. Here's a small little thank you. We're going to follow up with you if we can answer any other questions, but we would love to see you enrolling at XYZ Center. The amount of activities that you need to execute is growing every single year from a sales perspective. You need to have a choreographed sales process if you want to win this year. You need to be using all the different methods of follow-up: emails, text messages, voice drops, direct mail, lumpy mail, gifting strategies, Facebook Messenger. You need to be upping your game to a level that you've never had before. As discussed, I also am seeing that trend of more and more centers starting to have professional salespeople that are on their staff so that they're able to take, maybe that close rate has been hovering day of around 20%. But in putting in someone that you are able to give a little bit more of an aggressive offer and someone that's trained as a salesperson, maybe your closing percentage now goes to 40% or 35% day of. And then within the 2 to 4 week time period, maybe all of a sudden you're closing every other. But when you have these numbers, as I've said many, many times, it simply becomes math. How many leads do you need? How many tours is that going to equal? How many enrollments are you going to get? And if you know that you continue to have the same inputs by way of time and money, and you're changing the things up a little bit, but you want to get to that repeatable, predictable space, you do that by then having this perfectly choreographed sales process, from the initial interactions to this $1 million tour to all of the follow-ups. You're definitely using a CRM, customer relationship management tool, to track everything. Every call is being recorded. And the final add-on that I'm definitely going to see continue to grow in popularity is leveraging AI to actually listen to the calls and to tell you how the calls are going, the sentiment on the calls, and being able to give more and more feedback so your salesperson and or people that are doing it continue to get better and better and better. That's what I've got for you by way of sales. So we've talked about marketing, accounting, sales. Next week, we're going to talk team and talent, and then finish out this MASS framework with systems and strategy. Have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week. It's Michael Tesser signing off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. See you next week.